It's like you're going to hit that wall much earlier. And so the other skill sets we talked about being able to lead, being able to empathize, understand the problems people are dealing with, see those problems, translate them back into solutions, and the things that are uniquely human, I think those are going to become even more important if you're looking to grow a career. And do different is I would have started earlier on my own. I would have built on my own. I would have created on my own. And not felt like I needed to be under the wing of a corporation or something for protection, because that's an illusion, right? Just because you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks and you have good benefits and a 401k, that's not a reason to not go create and build, because that is an illusion of security that can be taken away from you. If I'm 45 years old, if I want to be a doctor right now, okay, good luck, right? That's a very prescribed set of things that you need to go through, pardon the pun. But technology is not that way, right? That barrier is not there. The barrier is you can train yourself. You can, for free, become an AI expert and be building your own models and building your own capabilities. There's really no barrier to entry into technology beyond the amount of time and effort you're willing to put into it to get yourself up to speed from the knowledge.
Guest today, Ryan Fox from Fox Strategy Company. What did you think about this talk with Ryan?
It was great. He had multiple low points in his life that he really utilized to build into the career that he is currently building out over at Fox Strategy Co. So very great insights from Ryan.
Again, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. So let's just kind of start out here. And if you don't mind, take us through your story. What was your path to your current role at Fox Strategy Co?
Yeah, sure. I guess it's good we have this amount of time. It's not necessarily a short story. I grew up, I live in Washington, D.C. now. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a farming town just outside of there. First person in my family to ever go to college. So, had to kind of find my way through that process. I met my wife when I was 17. We've been married for coming up on 25 years now. We went to college together in Cleveland, Tennessee. She's much smarter than I am. We made our way out to Washington, D.C. after college for her to go to law school out here. And through that process is where my career kind of started. I actually, I'm a 9/11 guy, right? I was in college during 9/11. And so when we got to the DC area in about 2003, I was actually about to join the Army. I had my swearing in date and everything lined up. And my grandfather called me a couple nights before it was my time to show up and kind of said, "Hey, listen, there's lots of ways to help and to serve. I think you should find another one. I don't think that's the right path for you." And so, I took that to heart and kind of walked away from that option and started kind of going down the security route with computers. So, for me, that was a natural organic transition. I was already kind of into that. I actually got in trouble my freshman year of college for dropping our college network, mostly on accident. So I found my way into a small consulting shop and began building a career from there. So first part of my career was in the defense and the intelligence space. All the big contractors around the Beltway, 3-letter agencies, and then ended up in New York City, where I led identity and access management for the United Nations for about a year and a half. And then eventually found my way to a small company called Anacam, which is where I met Mr. Castle. And we got eaten up by Equifax. I spent a year or so there afterwards. I was the chief product officer for a startup called ID.me, which is now a unicorn. And then, probably the two most recent kind of impactful roles, I was at Capital One for almost 5 years, leading identity access management, identity verification services, a number of different kind of product areas. And then I ended up at Worldpay, where I led global fraud, identity, and applied crypto for them. both through the Worldpay integration with FIS, as well as the Vantiv acquisition that took place. All of that is a 20-year run. In, let's see, 2023, I was at Capital One and I got laid off. So there was a massive reorg that took place, and I got cut. I had come back. I'd been there for a year, got put into an I formation. It was pretty obvious it was coming. So I got released, and it was a little bit of a shocking moment. I had to reorient myself, but looking back on it now, it was the kick you out of the nest moment, and I'm kind of glad it happened, because it's led me to where I'm at now, which is I started Fox Strategy Co. And I've been providing cybersecurity consulting services to large enterprises. I provide strategy services to one of the largest consulting firms in the U.S. And I work with venture capital firms and startups, essentially serving as a fractional chief product officer to several different companies. So it's been good. It's been an interesting path, one I couldn't have predicted. But that's how I got to where I'm at today.
Excellent.
What really sparked your interest in technology? Was it just that initial move into cybersecurity at your first company?
Yeah. I mean, I think my interest in cyber was there since I was 14 years old, honestly. I got an Acer computer when I was 14 years old, and rather than playing video games and stuff, I was pretty quickly out there looking for open ports and building my own botnets and downloading, little kits to be able to try to exploit vulnerabilities and, stuff that no 14-year-old has any business doing. Luckily that was early 90s, so there wasn't a lot of eyes on those systems to come and get me for not doing nice things. But that's really how I started in that space. Was as a kid, it was just something I was drawn to. I'm sure I probably had seen too many movies or whatever at that point to make me interested in it, Bob. But that's really where it started. I think the other part of it, though, as I went along, was for me, people are messy, right? People are really messy. They're chaotic and they're unpredictable. Technology for me is always kind of been a happy place, because it's controllable, right? To a large extent, you can define it, you can architect it, you can shift it in systematic ways. You can't do that with people, right? People are much more organic and challenging, and so for me, it always felt like a happy place.
Now it's interesting because you were very technical, and then you've shifted from.
Yeah.
I mean, there's technical aspects of your work, but you've shifted to strategy, right? Which is, people consider that to be the opposite of technical.
Yeah, I think it's funny, like when you ask those questions, it triggers specific memories, right? And I had a very specific memory. I was working at Booz Allen. I had moved back down from New York City. I had grown my little patch of grass, from nothing to about a $5 million run rate. I hired a team. I was, running groups, and but I wasn't getting ahead. I wasn't getting promoted to that next level. And one of the partners at the time sat me down, and we were having like a skip level, and I was like, hey, what do I need to do here? And essentially, I don't remember the exact words that he used, but he essentially told me I was tapping out from a technical perspective, right? You're only going to be able to create so much value with what you know in your head and what you're able to do with your own two hands. You're going to only be able to create so much value. And Ryan, hey, the next level here is about building leverage. And the way that you build leverage is through other people, right? You don't do that through being the smartest guy in the room. You do that through building leverage through other individuals, through building leverage through systems. And so I think that was the moment for me that I realized, like, hey, if I wanted to keep growing and accelerating in my career, this was going to have to be a people job. And I think that was a perfect intersection for me, because as much as I love tech and the predictability of it, my degree was in psychology, right? So what the heck, right? So clearly there was this this desire there and this capacity to connect on a human level, and I think that was the point in time where it kind of all came together for me.
Yeah, that's interesting because with that psychology background, I gotta think you pull on those skills almost more than your technology skills right now, right? So
Yes,
it's all psychology, whether it's, dealing with your employees or working with your clients and
Yeah.
trying to advise them on the best course of action. So
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. I use that more than any of my cybersecurity subject matter expertise on a daily basis. I How do I reconcile that? I mean, I don't know that it's a reconciliation as much as it's just a realization of where I need to put my energy, right? A lot of what I do now ends up looking almost like executive coaching, right? My clients and the challenges that they're facing. Yes, they're technical in some circumstances, but most of the time it's organizational dynamics, it's relationships, it's personalities, it's, how do I get this group on board with what I'm trying to do? And so you really start to get back to, your ability to empathize, your ability to understand what challenges or your teammates are facing, what's motivating them, what their strategies are, and helping my customers, my clients get better at that is, one of the ways I'm more impactful nowadays than I ever was with technology.
You've kind of touched on the psychology aspect that helped with your background. What other potential skills do you feel are very transferable over to the technology field for somebody who may be interested in making that leap into IT or cybersecurity and doesn't know how their current
Yeah.
profession would transfer over?
Yeah. I mean, I think about it, Tyler. I look and I think about like, um, everybody has this tool chest of skills that they have, right? And some of those tools are sharper than others.
Right.
But it's, what tools do I have? Which ones can I deploy today to begin making progress and adding values? Which ones do I need to acquire, and which ones do I need to sharpen, kind of thing, right?
Yep.
And so for me, like when I think about like my toolbox of what skills and stuff I bring to the table that have allowed me to kind of progress in my career, I think there was that technical capacity that was already there, right? I remember like my parents getting mad at me. I was probably 11, 12 years old, and I had taken apart a remote control car and found some old fireworks, some old bottle rockets, and I created a remote detonator system so that I
Yeah.
could remotely launch, explosives at my house. That didn't go over well. But I always had that technical, like, how does this work? I want to tear it apart. I want to build new things. At the same time, I was doing music. I'm a musician. I love to play guitar. I love to sing. As a young adult, I was in musicals and stuff like that, and in high school and middle school. And I think all that kind of speaks to my interest in, putting on a show and entertaining and engaging people and pulling them in and making them feel something. I went to college originally to be a pastor. That's probably a podcast in and of itself. But again, what were the underlying motivators there, right? I wanted people to feel something. I wanted to help them. I wanted to give them something tangible. I wanted my leadership to matter and be impactful. And so even though, I realized pretty quickly being a pastor wasn't the right fit for me, it's a lot of those same motivators and drivers and skill sets that have been in play since I was a kid are still in play today. I think I've just been able to kind of orchestrate them together and use them and make the most out of, what I have to work with, which is, not much depending on who you ask, but I think I've been able to do a lot with it by integrating those different skills together, Tyler.
Awesome. So I think the key takeaway from this is, kind of like you said, everybody has their own kind of tool set, some sharper than others, but there's so many different skill sets that translate to IT and will help with that background and building, kind of on that foundation, helping people interested in switching careers. So definitely appreciate that insight.
Yeah, I always hate the people will introduce themselves and they'll say, I'm a technologist. what the hell does that mean?
Right.
I don't know what that means. Like, it's 2025 and like your car will pick you up in front of the store if you wanted to. Like, we're all technologists. Like, we're living in it, using it every day in ways that were unfathomable 20 years ago. Everybody's a technologist. Like, the gap in knowledge and being able to engage in the technology field today, in my opinion, is a lot lower than it was 20 years ago.
I
The
agree.
baseline knowledge set that somebody's walking in with is much higher than it was 20 years ago.
AI has really helped that gap as well, helping people know a whole lot more than, as you said, people would have 20 years ago just by learning a couple of prompts with ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think it's not that information wasn't always there, right? It's humans as a species are rather lazy, and now you can go and have it delivered to your front door versus actually having to do your research yourself. But yeah, it's helped.
So before this call, you were sharing a little bit about some of the challenges. What were
Yeah.
some of those challenges and how you overcame that hurdle? I think it might be very beneficial to some of the young leaders that are listening to this.
Yeah, I mean, Bob and I had a chance to connect, and I was telling him that man, it's hard for me to figure out how to talk about my career arc and my journey without pulling in some of the personal challenges that have happened along my route, because they've been so transformative. I think for me, there's a couple of dates and times that are pivot points in my career. Some of those are leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with, like Bob, that have been impactful and changed the trajectory of my life. And sometimes it's negative things. In 2016, I lost my best friend of 20 years. We'd known each other since we were 5, to suicide. And that was that's something that leaves a scar on me that never goes away. And it really reoriented how I thought about my life and what was important. And, really had me start kind of rebalancing things. And then in 2023, my daughter actually attempted suicide. And that was a full system shutdown situation, right? You may remember from my prior comment, 2023 was also the year that I lost my job at Capital One. And so I actually received the news that I was being formally laid off while I was in the hospital with her. And so that was a full, like I said, that was a full system shutdown, all hands on deck, focusing on what needed to be done inside of these 4 walls, to keep our family moving forward. But the lesson I think that I've taken from that now 2.5 years on is really one of just resilience. I think I was always so scared of failure in my life, right? And as a result of that, I was not making big enough bets. I was not trusting myself and investing in myself because I was afraid of failure, And so I found myself in a position where I didn't really have a lot left to lose that mattered, right? Everything that mattered to me or had mattered to me was either gone or at risk of being gone. And, I had already lost my dear friend. And so, like, what am I afraid of, right? And so I think I learned a really valuable lesson on resilience there. And I think that translates across the board. It's a pretty dramatic set of events. But I think anyone that's older than probably 20, I have bad news for you, right? Your day is coming. It's going to happen to all of us, right? You're going to get punched in the face. You're going to get taken out. You're going to fail. You're going to be undervalued. You're going to be discarded. All of those things are going to happen. And the question is not like what you can do to prevent that. The question is, how are you going to respond when it does happen? And for me, I think at the end of the day, the thing that has been transformational is realizing how to take pain and adversity and fear and all of those negative emotions and turn them into fuel, right? How can you turn that into something you can burn? You know, and that's a super individualized thing, right? You got to know a lot about yourself to be able to do that. But that to me that is the difference in leadership. That's the difference in life is, you know, whether or not you can figure out how to not be a victim, right, of your life circumstances. Don't get mad at reality, accept it, figure out how to respond, and figure out how to turn pain and adversity into gasoline that you can burn. And that's how you can make it through that to the next level.
Yeah, that's a profound story, Ryan. And what kind of occurs to me is that there's no way to separate the leader from his whole life, right? You know, CEO of a company, had a whole career, got a family, you got friends. There are tragic scenarios happen. You turn this negative situation into fuel that creates some positive momentum in your life.
I think there's this idea in, you know, when they're training anyone who's going to be in a dangerous situation, whether it's a military situation or a law enforcement situation. It's the same technique they use for people who have phobias, and it's called stress inoculation, right? And the idea is that by exposing you systematically to stressors, you are reducing your response to those stressors over time, right? And so I think when I look back on all of that, like when I'm in a meeting now and everybody's getting heated about some topic that they're also passionate about, or you know, maybe things didn't work out the way you wanted it to for that promotion or whatever, it's created so much perspective for me that those things seem small and I'm unmoved by them now, right? Like it's pretty hard to get me riled up. Whereas, you know, and I think Bob will tell you this, that was not a difficult thing to do 10 or 15 years for me, right? Like you give me the wrong look and I'm about ready to go over the table. And I'm just not like that anymore. And I think that's a result of having a reframed perspective of what matters, right? It's not an attack on me. It's not a personal attack. I'm not at risk. I know what being at risk looks like. I know what real pain looks like and real danger looks like. And so I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to get frustrated. You know, that's great. That's due tomorrow. Let's do it, right? So for me, that's yes, the meaning, but I think it's also about the perspective.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
I would like to kind of piggyback on this and kind of ask Ryan about your approach to leadership and how those challenges and that adversity has maybe shaped that since those events that occurred.
Yeah. I've been super fortunate throughout my career to be, you know, I think I had a good background coming into things as we discussed, but to be invested in as well, right? And you know, I've been through some leadership training that was, you know, I was there for the coffee and the lunch, and otherwise that was the only value I got out of it. But I've also gone through some programs that have been super impactful, and one of those, there was a ton of focus on values and bringing your whole self to the table, and radical candor, and you know, these types of concepts that really helped shift my approach to leadership, which is one that's really based on respect and relationships now, right? I look at leadership as an opportunity to help people become their best version of themselves. And in doing so, they will have the best possible impact that they can have for my team, my organization, and my mission, right? So, you know, I focus from a leadership perspective on clarity, ensuring that there's exceptional clarity on what the mission is, what our vision is, our values as a team, and how we operate. And then I get super individualized and focus on building relationships with those folks, understanding what challenges they're bringing to the table, right? What is their whole life that they're bringing to the table, being transparent about my whole life, you know, within reason, and how that's impacting me. And when you do that, you're able to connect in a way that you don't otherwise. And so that's the whole concept of radical candor, right? Is like being honest and transparent while being loving and empathetic. And, you know, if you're just being transparent with people, that's called being an asshole. And if you're just being loving and accepting, that's called like just blowing smoke up people's skirts, right? You're the guy that's just making everybody feel good, but shit's not getting done. But the balance between those two things, if you can ride that linear curve on the balance between those two axes, I think that's the sweet spot.
Nice. You want to go to AI?
Yeah, fine by me.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So yeah, AI is a big passion of mine, Ryan. I love just seeing it evolve. I know AI has been around for many years now, but people have really just kind of taken notice over the last 2 or 3 since ChatGPT jumped onto the scene. So I'm wondering, how do you personally view kind of the rise of AI in business? Do you see it as a disruptor, an opportunity, both? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's both. I think we have a habit of doing this as a technology society where, you know, we value speed and efficiency and impact so much, you know, the F it, ship it mentality, that I think that, you know, the likelihood that we are very blind and don't know it with regards to AI is really high. I don't necessarily share the doomsday scenario views of AI where we're going to all be, you know, running from Skynet. But I do think that it's a compounding issue on a problem that already existed, Tyler, and we already had a transparency issue, right? I operate, you know, within kind of a domain of cyber that I've already been working with machine learning and, you know, large language models and the foundational components of AI for several years, and we already had a transparency issue, right? Where, hey, that's great that that's stopping fraud, but why is it stopping that individual? Based on what information, and, you know, how can I be assured that it doesn't have implicit bias in its modeling? Another example would be we're compiling software now, not from the ground up where somebody's, you know, working in COBOL. We're like, it's an amalgamation of open source information and code snippets we got off of here and there and everywhere. We don't even have transparency into the lineage of our code stacks and our environments. And that's why there's so much focus on things like SBOMs now, and ensuring that we understand, you know, where the software is coming from and how it's created. So that's the foundation upon which AI came into the world. And that's the part that kind of scares me the most about it is I think we're bringing technology into the boardroom, into the office, on a shaky foundation. We already had data issues. We already had transparency issues. And now we're bringing something generative that's going to exponentially amplify that problem if we're not careful.
Definitely. I can agree with that for sure. I know, as of this recording, at least, you have models that are just coming out left and right. I know ChatGPT is supposed to have a model that's going to be one of the top programmers, coders in the entire world by the end of the year is what they're expecting. Yep. Video models that can take and generate people and do, you know, merchandise type commercials for companies. So it's amazing the good that it can do. You know, as rapidly as AI is kind of advancing and changing, what do you see AI being in 5 to 10 years? Benefits, negative sides of it that potentially could come with the rapid advancement. You know, what are you kind of envisioning with what you've seen 5 to 10 years from now?
I think 5 to 10 years from now, AI will not exist as AI, right? The way that it does today, right? Like we think of AI now and it's like it exists in your Gemini box, it exists in your Claude box, it exists in your Anthropic box, whatever. I don't think that'll be the case. I think AI will be an embedded component of any digital asset that you're interacting with, right? Whether it's your thermostat, your card, or your computer. You know, the benefits of that, I mean, I think are fairly obvious as far as like things can be smarter and more efficient and more helpful, and you know, their ability to be more specialized and tuned to you and your specific needs, and all of the goodness that I think is, you know, routinely highlighted. I wonder what the long-term implications are of like, you know, what happened when 80% of your engineering force is vibe coding, right? And nobody actually knows how anything works anymore. right? When your doctor doesn't know how your body works anymore, right? Organically, because they were so reliant on machines. So I don't know. I think throughout human history, we see these examples of, as we automate, as we bring machines in, there are secondary and tertiary impacts that aren't realized for years, decades later. And I think the same is going to be true here. What are those going to be? I don't know. I think it changes the value that humans bring to the table, right? It's no longer about our generative capability as a species. It's now about our judgment. It's about our creativity, and it's about our relationships. So that can have some positive impacts, but it can also have some negative ones.
Yeah, Ryan, a lot of the people that I've talked to have been caught up in the layoffs that have been endemic in the tech industry over the last 2 to 3 years, basically since COVID, right? I kind of feel like AI was a convenient excuse, right, for the layoffs. But has it really replaced all those jobs?
No.
So there's something else, there's something else that's going on. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I think potentially it can still be kind of a first wave situation, Bob. Like, is it replacing those jobs? No. But like, I'll use a very specific example in my day-to-day life right now, which is kind of UX design, right? And I work in the product segment now, and over the last 10 years, I've been on the product side of the house when it comes to cybersecurity capabilities. And I would spend a ton of time with my UX designers, right? Trying to kind of get mock-ups for new products we were developing and changes and things like this. And it was a fun experience. I enjoyed it. It was one of the favorite parts of my job is interacting with design teams, but it's long and it's kind of back and forth, and you're trying to translate these ideas that you have in your head to another human who's going to then put it into a digital asset, and just a real kind of inefficient process.
Yeah.
I'm generating mock-ups for product concepts now, through a DALI integration on ChatGPT in 30 seconds that are ready to go into an investor deck, right? That are ready, frankly, to go in front of an actual UX coder, front end, coder, to be able to build those things. And so it's not necessarily that I think it's just replacing jobs. It's the fact that like a UX professional can now have 800% increased capacity. And an engineer can now have 1,000x capacity because of what their throughput is. And so that now allows an organization, especially these large ones, to start raising the bar. So what is your output? What is your performance expectations? And so an organization that was maybe clipping, at 1 or 2% of their population each year for performance issues and things like that, those numbers are starting to look like 5 to 8%, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're able to kind of tighten things down even more. And so I think you're going to see an acceleration of that curve where it's not necessarily the outright replacement of call center staff, as an example, right now, as much as it is that the demands of individuals in the space now having access to these tools is going up every day. And that's how you see that contraction play out.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example. A UI professional now can be a lot more productive, right?
Yeah.
By using AI tools, right? For example, I was working on my new website, and within one day, I have a really good version of that website.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it also ties back to kind of, what we were talking about earlier, and that is, I expressed this point in my career where like my value as an employee from had reached an endpoint, right? I can only have so much additional output. I think what you're going to see happen is that moment's going to come a lot earlier in people's careers, right? It's like you're going to hit that wall much earlier. And so the other skill sets we talked about, about being able to lead, being able to empathize, understand the problems people are dealing with, see those problems, translate them back into solutions, and the things that are uniquely human. I think those are going to become even more important if you're looking to grow a career in this sector.
Very good. So Tyler, back to you.
Awesome. Yeah, I got two more questions here, Ryan. First one, kind of jumping off of this previous point here. I kind of view AI now the way people are viewing it as back when smartphones became big. You had so many people that they wanted to stick with their flip phone. They didn't want to get a smartphone. They didn't think it was going to stick around. And there's a lot of people who have heard of AI. They've heard the buzzword, but they're not getting their hands on it. They're not testing it. Is that something that you would recommend people, get their hands on and start playing with, because it's something that won't be going away anytime soon?
No, because like I said, I think the space is going to contract, and I don't want more competition out there, Tyler. Yeah, I mean, listen. Yeah, if you're not using AI every day right now, it may already be too late. Like that needs to be front and center, as what you're investing time in, whether it's the research and understanding it or the actual use, which is even more important. See if I can do this without getting my kids mad at me. The use of AI in the education system is rampant right now as well, and I kind of have a hard time getting upset about that, right? Like if your kids are using AI to do their homework and stuff, right? I have a hard time getting upset about that. It's like, oh, that's cheating. No, it's not. That is you being smart and figuring out how to be efficient and how to accomplish things, and the people who do that are the people who make impacts, right? And not the people who sit there and do what they're told and keep working out how to do their fractions with their pencil and their pad of paper. Like, that's great. You're going to be well prepared to go into the workforce in 1945. I don't know what you're going to do though, right? Like it's just it is literally at the center of everything that's happening right now. And if you're not engaging with it on a routine basis, you're going to find yourself in a disadvantaged position.
Definitely. AI is a tool, and I definitely think people need to learn how to use it, because it'll be beneficial in the long run. Kind of speaking of AI tools, I know you've mentioned, DALL-E, ChatGPT, Claude, those kind of things. Are there any other tools, maybe less commonly known about, that you use or would recommend that have AI involved?
I think like my focus on it has been more about getting deep within the single areas versus going wide, and figuring out how to build custom kind of deployments. So for me, one of the things that I had a challenge with AI when I first started using it was its short-term memory and its inability to maintain context over an extended period of time, right? So like I took my deployment that I use, and I have a professional license and everything so that I can extend things, and I actually have deployed like separate memory repos in AWS that are connected into my ChatGPT instance. And so I'm actually maintaining a long-term memory storage. And so it's not like that I have other specific tools that I'm like, oh, hey, this thing's amazing. It's more like figuring out how best to use the tools that are there to accomplish the tasks that you need to do. That's really what my focus has been more on, than exploring every tool, at the edge of society. I am working with one of the portfolio companies with Capital Group that I'm working with right now, is an AI-based company, and they're in stealth mode right now. But the thing that's super interesting about them is they're actually ingesting the identities of creators, and then allowing those likenesses of those individuals, their voice, their movements, to then feed into a generative engine, which then can be consumed by corporations to create marketing materials, Instagram posts, whatever. The person's getting paid, but they never show up, right? You want to do 5 different commercials and let your user community pick which one's best. We can do that in a week with no one on site, no cameras, no travel budget. So I mean, the stuff that's happening right now is incredible. And there's a ton of different tools. I don't know that I'm the best person to give you the landscape view of all of it, Tyler, but those are a couple of my experiences and touch points.
That's that really covered everything I wanted from the AI section, Bob. Unless you had anything else to add.
No, that sounds great.
Let me add one more thing on AI, guys, if that's cool.
Sure.
I'll keep it short, but just one area of AI that we didn't really touch on that I think is super important is, how do we control this thing, right? That's the hot topic, especially in a cybersecurity range right now. And I think AI speaks so confidently that the chances of us blindly trusting it in our environments is high. And most organizations that are adopting these things and moving forward, I talked a little bit about the shaky foundation that they're building it on top of, but there's the new risk that's being introduced, which is what are the guardrails that are being put in place on this technology and how it's being used. And so for me, I am looking at technologies right now that are going deep into the code of applications and shimming the entire code base of your organization to track for behavioral anomalies, right? And so, how is that software performing? Is it performing within the accepted and tested bounds of that capability? Is it spawning new processes or moving into a generative phase that was not anticipated? And can you detect that in real time? So I think those type of things, Tyler, are like that's the type of capability that's emerging out of the sector in response to the generative capabilities of AI.
Very insightful.
Cool, Ryan. So looking back on your career journey and reflecting, is there anything you would do differently if you could start over with the knowledge that you have today?
Yeah, I think it's like I'm at that halftime phase, right, Bob, where you look back and think like, what did I do differently and what do I want to do on the second half of my career arc? And what I would have done differently is I mentioned this earlier. I would have bet on myself earlier. I would have built earlier. My worst case scenario back then, pre-kids and earlier in life when it was simple, was a bruised ego, right? That was the risk. My risk profile is much different now. And so, that would be what I would do different. Is I would have started earlier on my own. I would have built on my own. I would have created on my own. And not felt like I needed to be under the wing of a corporation or something for protection, because that's an illusion, right? Just because you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks and you have good benefits and a 401k, that's not a reason to not go create and build, because that is an illusion of security that can be taken away from you at a moment's notice.
Underlying your response is that now, going on your own has given you a sense of freedom that you didn't have before? Is that the right word, or is there another way that you characterize that?
I think it's freedom. I think it's also control. My wife is a federal employee. I was joking about that, but we've been a little on pins and needles here for the last couple of months, just because there's so much change happening.
Mhm.
And it's been interesting to see that, like, in the midst of all of that happening, and even economically, the stuff that's happening right now, and if you're working in a large organization and they're impacted by tariffs, for example, that's a scary time. I've been less scared about that because I have a network of clients that's diversified across different sectors, and maybe I lose a contract here or a customer there, but I actually feel more protected from the economy and from kind of social change right now than I would if I was in a large organization. So that's kind of interesting, and I think that kind of speaks to the control aspect of things. I'm in control of my own destiny, right?
Yeah.
This thing either succeeds or fails based on me. And not anyone else, right?
Yes.
And that's scary, but it's also, when you learn to trust yourself and you learn to actually believe in yourself, it's not scary at all.
And then what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out and aspires to go on a journey similar to yours?
I think when you're starting out, especially, your focus should be on creating value, and being undeniable. You need to earn respect before you ask for it. You need to earn credibility before you expect others to see it in you. So, don't wait. Don't expect things to be handed to you. Find problems that need to be solved, solve them, add value, go above and beyond whatever your role is right now. I think for me, Bob, and I think you can attest to this, but like in any role that I've had, my target was never what my job was. The target that I was aiming for was here. And so I was always looking for opportunities to add value above and beyond what my, standard day-to-day responsibilities of client engagement or whatever were. And that speaks to to my point of like, find ways to add value. Don't get outworked, whatever other trite, saying that you might have, but I think that's actually the most important thing.
Yeah.
Brian, are there any books, mentors, or resources that have been really influential in your career journey for leadership and technology that you would either recommend or could speak to?
I think early on, like a book that really stuck with me through college was Good to Great by Jim Collins. That's always been a foundational book for me. I'm a data-driven kind of person, and I don't love leadership books that aren't kind of really backed by empirical evidence, and that's one of them, right? That was a very thorough longitudinal study across a lot of different really successful people looking for common traits and characteristics, many of which kind of mirror a lot of the leadership characteristics that I was describing earlier. So that's been a good one for me. The other one, and this is probably a little bit too like bro grammar of me, but I've been reading a lot of Marcus Aurelius meditations over the last 2 years. And that's been a very like grounding read for me, a very grounding book. That's kind of constantly providing practical, operational advice for me in a day-to-day capacity. So those are two that come to mind off the top of my head.
Awesome. One other question I wanted to ask, someone who has come from a situation like this, I ended up making the shift over to the technology sector and never looked back once I made that shift. What if there's somebody kind of teetering on the fence, if they're in a career that they don't love, they've been considering jumping into IT or cybersecurity, they don't really know how to get started? What advice would you give somebody in that position?
Yeah, I have people ask me these questions, and I think my historic answer was like there were some good entry points into the space. There was a number of people that I helped. I lived in Cincinnati for 3 years after my friend passed away, and we ended up moving there. That's when I worked with Worldpay, and I brought a lot of people in through they were Scrum Masters, and that's a role that you can kind of come into the field, get up to speed, get certified. You're effectively a project manager, but operating within a predefined set of kind of processes. But I think I know this Scrum Master role is probably not long for this world, given the way that development cycles are evolving right now. But look for those kind of entry point roles that don't require deep technical expertise to kind of get your toe in the door. It's a field that doesn't have a set of formal entry requirements, right? If I'm 45 years old, if I want to be a doctor right now, okay, good luck, right? That's a very prescribed set of things that you need to go through, pardon the pun. But technology is not that way, right? That barrier is not there. The barrier is you can train yourself. You can, for free, become an AI expert. And be building your own models and building your own capabilities. So there's really no barrier to entry into technology beyond the amount of time and effort you're willing to put into it to get yourself up to speed from a knowledge perspective. So that's kind of on the functional side. The other side is on the relationship side, right? Like if your game plan is applying for jobs that you see on LinkedIn and Monster, is that still around? Like that's just not a good plan, right? It's relationships. So finding community groups around you that are, having speaker series and on topics that are relevant, and getting to meet people and beginning to build your professional network in the sector, I think, is the other kind of key leg of the stool there, if you will, in moving yourself into a technical career. Because that was only two legs on the stool. You should probably think of it.
Bob, do you have any other questions on this, or open it up to Ryan if there's anything else he wanted to touch on before we finish up here? Anything we missed, Ryan, that you'd want to talk about? Or
Give me 1 second here. No, I don't have anything that we haven't really touched on that is of any value.
Okay. All right. Well, so Ryan, what's the best way to get in touch with you if somebody is interested in having a conversation?
Yeah, I'd say the two easiest ways to get a hold of me are either you can go, I have a website that's foxstrategyco.com, and you can contact me through there. And I'm also pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. So those are probably the two easiest ways.
Sounds
we'll
good.
make sure to include those links in the description as well.
Awesome.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Ryan. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with Tyler and me today. It was very enlightening, as always.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it. And thank you, Tyler.